All right, this is probably take number 25 here. All right, so what I want to do is so much of what we're talking about here, propellers and engine RPM, manifold pressure, and operation of an aircraft would be so much easier if I could take everybody up flying and you could experience it and play with the controls. But that becomes a little difficult with a lot of students and the cost and expense of taking you offline. So we are going to use X-Plane here, and we're going to use the Baron here, the Beech Baron 58. And this appears to be a normally aspirated, fuel-injected engines on this particular aircraft, and we are going to go for a flight. So, all right, change my screen here, take us back inside the cockpit. Back inside the cockpit. Hey, there we go. Okay, so what we want to do first thing is, hey, there's an airplane right there. We got to get this thing started. So to start a fuel-injected engine, first we'd bring up the battery, and I just usually turn on my alternators while I'm there so I don't end up forgetting, is we would bring up, we'll start the left engine first. We're going to bring up the mixture, bring up a little bit of fuel here. We only need that one forward. And we're going to watch the fuel flow right there. So watching the fuel flow, I'm going to bring in the boost pump. And we get a little fuel flow. Once we get fuel flow showing, then we can bring it over here, hit the start. Engine goes ahead and starts for us. All right, bring that back to idle. So we're idling the left engine. Now, the nice thing about X-Plane, honestly, is you can cheat a little bit. You don't need to do all that. You can just go ahead and click the starter. Once you bring in the mixture. So you can cheat, but you can't cheat that much. All right, so we've got both engines now up and running. We'll bring up our avionics master. We are lined up at McClellan on runway 16, if I'm not mistaken. There we go. There's our control tower over there, and there's the big building right outside of our hangar. And I guess if we can look, well, so if we look a little bit left, we'd see our hangar. You'd be mad at me if I didn't do it. So let me see. Can I look left? There we go. You can't really tell, but we're over there, right? Okay. So here we are lined up on the runway. And what I want to do here, because that's really not so much a flight demo, is I want to kind of get this thing going in autopilot. So we're going to take the cursor, bring the cursor around to runway heading so that we can just take off and use the autopilot to do most of what I need to do here. All right. Well, like any good pilot, we'd want to do a run up, wouldn't we? So back up here so we can look at the controls and our gauges all at the same time. So we have manifold pressure up top, RPM, fuel flow, CHT, EGT, oil temp, oil pressure, and we have the brakes on. So we're going to bring up one engine. We'll bring up the left side, give it to about 1700 RPM. 1700, and if we do a mag check, so we can watch the RPM is going to drop, and our EGT should go up a little bit, so we'll check it out. I got a little bit of a drop, and maybe a little bit of EGT, so we'll go back to both. Then do left. Runs good on the left, runs good on the right, back to both, and bring that back down. Bring this one up to 1700. Touchy throttles there, and do the same thing. Left, back to both, right, back to both. And what I didn't do last time, and I should have done, is we will do a propeller cycle. Now this thing is very sensitive, so as we pull this back, whoosh, we get a big propeller cycle there. I wouldn't really do that in a real airplane, but let's, I wouldn't do this in an airplane either, but here we're going to see what happens here. So I got both engines back to idle. Now let's bring them both up to, let's go wide open throttle, and we're on the brakes. And you will notice that our manifold pressure comes just about 1 inch below our current, so 29.92, 30, so we're about an inch below. That's about 2 inches below. We can see that both of the RPMs have hit red line, which they're supposed to do. Let me zoom in a little bit on the stuff. So right at red line, a little bit low. I'd probably want to consider adjusting that, but we'll see what happens when we release the brakes. Fuel flow, oh, that's a lot of gallons per hour. And we can see our CHT, EGTs, oil temp is going up, oil pressure is at the top of the green. So we wouldn't normally do this on a pre-run, just sit here and run both engines wide open throttle, but wanted you to see what's happening right there. All right, so we'll pull these back to idle, and we are ready for takeoff. So notice again, manifold pressure at idle. We have a significant suction at idle. We are idling at about 900 RPM. Fuel flow is less than 5 gallons per hour. CHTs are down below 150, oil temp around 80. So as we bring up the throttle and release the brakes, let's see what happens. So we're going to go wide open here. And I kind of have to look out the window as I'm doing this. We'll see what happens. Release the brakes. Start the roll. And we can see they're right up to red line. Looking over here at my airspeed, time to pull up. And get the gear up. Gears up. And like I said, I don't really want to sit here and fly this as we're talking. So what I'm going to do is come down here, turn on my autopilot, and go to heading mode. Autopilot lit up right there. Go to heading mode. Heading mode, so it's going to follow that little bug right there. And we're climbing at about 2,000 feet per minute. So I can let go of the yoke over here. And we're looking pretty good. So, all right. So note that, oops, we're kind of getting carried away here on our, there we go, climbing nice. Note that our manifold pressure is going to start dropping. It's going to start dropping simply because we're going up in altitude and we just don't have the atmosphere that we had a little bit more. That didn't make sense, sorry. We're going to have the manifold pressure is going to be dropping because we don't have the same outside air pressure. As we go up, air pressure is going to decrease, obviously, and it's going to also it's going to show it right here at the same time. Now you'll see that the props are in fact out of sync, even though I have them both forward. Well, that one was back just a little bit. There we go. All right, and we can turn on the prop sync. Well, let's get them out of sync just a little tiny bit. See if the prop sync on this thing works. So propeller sync. One act the governor to adjust, and look at that. Right there shows us that both propellers are in fact going at the same speed. So there we go. We're climbing out. We're at 2,900. We're doing about a little over 1,500 feet per minute. We are doing 120 knots. And we're seeing our manifold pressure go down, down, down. And that's fine. It's what it's supposed to do. So normally after a climb out in my particular plane, I'd back off on the manifold pressure a little bit, but hey, this is a rented airplane, so we can just keep flogging it here. So we're going to get up here, I think about 4,000 feet is going to be just fine for what we need to do. So let's go hit our altitude hold right here. It's going to oscillate quite a bit, so I should probably kind of bring it in, help it out a little bit. All right, so we've leveled off here right about 6,300. Still going to do some of its oscillations because I got everything wide open. But once we've reached our cruising altitude, we're going to pull back on our throttles, and we're going to see that the RPM is going to stay right here at red line. And the manifold pressure is actually the thing that I'm going to move because throttles are going to control that. So we'll bring this back to about 20 inches just for the heck of it. So we're at about 20 and a half, 21 inches. And now notice, like I said, the RPM is going to stay right where it is. Well, the RPM is staying there because the propellers flatten out as I pull back the manifold pressure. Now, if I continue to do it and pull back the throttles, pull back the throttles, pull back the throttles, pull back the throttles, at some point, the prop is going to go all the way to its low pitch stop if they program this right. and it just simply can't keep that RPM. Well, this particular programming, there we go, just a little bit delayed, so now you can see that it won't do that. But we'll bring this back up to 20 inches. So like I said, at some point, you bring the throttles back, the prop goes all the way to flat, and then you just can't keep up. So you're going to start losing RPM. It can only do it so much. All right, so right there we've got about 21 inches. And let's see if we can pull the props back right here. Here goes the green knobs. We're pulling them back, pulling them back. We're going to pull that back to an RPM of about 21 inches. Now notice my manifold is actually going up as I'm doing that. It's slowing the engine down. It's giving cylinders more time to fill up, which means the manifold pressure is going up. So I'd have to pull back my manifold just a little bit more. Back to 21. So there we go. So we're about 20 and a half, 20 and a half. So 20 and a half here, 20 and a half there. And we're flying along right here at 15 gallons per hour. But given that we're at 6,400, we can certainly try leaning it out a little bit. We'll tell you what, we'll lean out the left to begin with. So let's watch our EGT right here and see what happens. So as we pull this back, we're going to be extracting more and more work energy out of the mixture, and it should, I'm sorry, we're looking at this one over here, should be going up, 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 and we're going to look for peak. Normally I do this a little bit slower. There we go. Peak EG just happens to be, they programmed at the top of that. Now we're going back the other way, so we can go back up a little bit. Let's find peak. So peak is right there, just happens to be at the top of the arc just because of the way they programmed it that way. And now we're flying along at peak EGT, and we can either enrich in it and go 50, 75 degrees rich at peak right there. I've enriched it, or we can go back to peak. I'm going to pull it back to peak. And oops, went too far. So go to peak. Let's try back to peak, back to peak. Oops, that was the wrong button to push. All right, mixture's full. Let's pull it back to peak. Right about there. So we're at peak. I think overshot it just a little bit. Peak. So we can either go forward to go 50 degrees rich of peak, or backwards and go lean of peak. So let's take this one and we'll go lean of peak and see what happens. We'll go lean of peak. Pull it back a little bit. A little bit. There we go. Now it's starting to drop. So now we went down. If each one is 25, it went down 25 or 50 degrees. Lean of peak. Now we do the same thing on the right engine. We can pull it back. If we can find peak. Peak is right about there. Now notice the difference in fuel flow. So this one's 8 gallons per hour, and this one over here is 10 gallons per hour at peak. So we can go rich at peak, which would be going forward on this one. So we have the left engine at lean of peak, the right engine rich of peak. Both of them are 50 degrees cool, so 50 degrees lean of peak, 50 degrees rich of peak, and you can see the difference in fuel flow. This one is at 13 gallons per hour, and that one is at 8 gallons per hour. Well, this engine over here is actually producing quite a bit more. I'm sorry, this engine here is producing, the right side be producing more power. I pretty much guarantee that one. Well, number one, we have a split in our manifold pressure. You can see that. So yeah, more power. So we'll bring this one back up to match. Bring it back up to peak. And bring it right back in. There we go. So now we're running them both about over 13 gallons per hour. Manifold pressures are matched. RPMs are matched. Our indicator right here shows that we have a matched engine RPM and propeller RPM. All right, so there we go. So that's how it works. Now, just to play around a little bit with things, again, if I start pulling back or playing with the throttles, I'll do both at the same time. If I put the throttles forward, RPM is going to stay the same. Manifold pressure is going to go up, going up a little bit. And if I pull back, we are going to start losing manifold pressure. So if we look up here, we can see the manifold pressure. Forward, get more manifold pressure, pull it back, less manifold pressure, but our RPM stays locked on target because the blue knobs control the RPM. So we can go back to 20, whatever, get 21. All right, and if I hit the right buttons here, I can't move them both at the same time unless I use my keyboard, so there we go. So pull the props back, pull them back. We're going to see our RPM decreasing. And coincidentally, manifold pressure will change. Or we can bring the props forward. And that will increase our RPM. So this is going to, blue is RPM. Black is going to control manifold pressure to a point when dropping down. And the red knob is going to control our mixture. All right, so we are flying along. Let's have a little fun with this thing here. And let's look out the window over here. Let's see if we can do that. Let's see. There we go. We got a prop spinning over there. We can see it spinning. And what happens if we have an engine problem and we have to put that engine away? All right, so let's say we're having a drop in oil pressure over here, went down to 0, or we need to shut it down. So what we're going to do, we can pull the mixture all the way back. That kills the engine. We'll take the propeller, pull it past the gate all the way back into feather, and we'll take a look outside and see what we've got going on. And let's see, we've got an engine there in feather. So it's going to look just like that. So now we're flying along on the right engine only. So it's out there spinning away. Guess we can't really see it. But notice back over here, thankfully, our prop sync didn't lock it in, but we have an engine on the right side spinning much, much faster. There we go. Locked in. Okay. Okay, so we now need to start our engine back up. Now, if this had an accumulator, we'll bring our mixture back up so we can start when we want to. If it had an accumulator, all I would need to do is take this propeller lever and pull it forward, and that would have the accumulator would put oil pressure into the propeller, taking it out of feather and start windmilling. But it doesn't have an accumulator. You can tell because we just put it forward, didn't work. So to start it, we're now going to come over here to the starter and just hit the start button. And as soon as it starts, the oil pressure is going to come up, bring that prop back into a lower pitch, and start running. Of course, now we need to match our propeller RPMs. Prop sync is still on, so I think as long as I get close with this one, we should work. So there we go. Flying around. That's how it works.